Alright everyone, welcome back to the Alexo channel. My name is Alex, and this is a review of the new Vampire Weekend album, which is called Father of the Bride. Now, Vampire Weekend, if you don't know, is an indie pop band from New York City that really broke through in 2008 with their debut album, which was self-titled. That album immediately made them one of the world's most notable and well-known indie bands of all time, and this streak continued throughout their next two albums, Contra and Modern Vampires of the City. They took cues as much from indie pop as they did chamber pop and added a little bit of world music in for good effect as well. This world music influence did slowly dissipate as their next couple of albums came out, and it's almost nowhere to be found on this new album, but it is really what broke them out at first. As their albums came out, it seemed like every time that they did release a new one, the indie pop scene would sort of gather around, wait for the release, and it would be some type of event. And Father of the Bride, this album, is no different. Now look, I'm not really a fan of Vampire Weekend. I did like Mansard Roof from their debut as well as A-Punk, and I did like Step from Modern Vampires of the City, but I never really got into any of their albums, so this really is my first full-length experience with one of their albums as it comes out. Besides, I was 10 when the debut album came out, so I really wasn't able to keep up with that release. However, the marketing of this album is what drew me in. The release of a couple singles, as well as that very obvious record label touting album cover, and the guess the acronym game of FOTB. My guess was The Life of Pablo. Also, the fact that this album was going to be 18 tracks long made me curious, because that just seemed like way too many tracks for a band that really didn't have a track record of being the most diverse group in the world. As I watched these singles come out, and as I watched the hype around it kind of take a strange turn where a lot of people were less excited for the album when they started hearing the singles and some people were more excited, I got very curious. Would it even be possible for a group to return from a 6-year album hiatus minus one member with an 18-track, hour-long record that features a slew of guests that make multiple appearances and have that album be anything but an overlong mess? Well, the short answer is no. But the short answer is not a good enough answer, because I do like this album quite a bit. Like I said, it does run 18 tracks and an hour long, and it is definitely an overlong record. But 8 of those songs are under 3 minutes long, and only one of them goes above 5 minutes, which does make it a little bit more tolerable in terms of sitting through it, because you know that none of the songs are going to be long enough to really test your patience. Plus, I do believe that this album really could have crashed and burned under the wrong hands, and in this case, I really do think that Ezra, the main singer of the band, did pull off something pretty impressive here. Now, it's not the most cohesive record in the world or anything, but on this album, Ezra and the rest of the group have pulled together what I think is a very fun mix of genres over the course of an hour that, while it is hard to sit through and a little bit of a mess, is a good record regardless. One of the main positives about this album is the fact that it starts extremely strong. The first 5 songs on this record are all extremely good and start the record off on a foot that gets me hooked in every time and makes me want to just listen to the entire thing, even if I don't end up making it through the entire thing. The opener, Hold You Now, is a very ambitious but also mild and comforting piece of indie folk that really sets the tone for the record's diverse style. There's the moderately rough recording of Ezra, the guitar, and the nature sound effects that seem like they were all recorded on some type of personal handheld recorder that, instead of starting the album off with a bombastic pomp that most 18-track records would be starting off on, just kind of settles and invites you in to experience this new and very strange little album. However, that doesn't really remain for long, as the chorus of the track features these very strange choral vocals that are glitched out and extended way past when it seems like the singers actually stopped giving it a very strange glitchy feel, but not a very cohesive glitchy feel. I don't really think that the choral vocals really match well with the rest of the song, but I also think it's way too interesting of a choice, and one that isn't, it's not a bad choice, so that I don't think that it really ruins the song. Plus, this is the first of 3 collaborations from singer Danielle Haim, and her vocals on this, as well as her strange parallels to the lyricism of Ezra, really also brings you into the rest of the record. And even though her vocal part is also followed by that very strange and glitchy chorus, it serves as, in my opinion, a pretty good opening track. At the very least, it makes these intentions clear. This is going to be a strange listen. Things get even better on the next track, Harmony Hall, which is another combination of indie pop and indie folk, but this time features some almost Primal Scream alternative dance style drums and pianos on the chorus, which honestly goes off without a hitch and is completely natural in the song. The lyrics on this song, as well as on many of the songs on the album, if we're going to talk about that, really kind of leaves me in the dark, as most of the songs on this album seem to deal with infidelity, relationships, Christianity, but they all seem to talk about them in this very strange, abstract way in which I really don't know what Ezra is trying to communicate. But I think that in this album, the songs really kind of speak for themselves and make the lyrics not a focal point at all. Anyway, this song, like I said, is even stronger than Hold You Now. It's the longest song on the album at 5 minutes and 9 seconds, but it doesn't overstay its welcome in the slightest, and it's an extremely catchy song with a great vocal melody and a very emotional performance by Ezra. Then we have Bambina, the first short track on the record, and I really like it as well. I don't think it's as good as Harmony Hall, but it is a really good song. It doesn't even reach the 2-minute mark, but the infectious vocal melody, the energetic production and playing, and the way that the verses and choruses contrast in such a really cohesive and well-formed way makes it a very early and good highlight on the record as well. Plus, it helps to know that this song, even though it is under 2 minutes long, does get its entire point across and doesn't feel like it was rushed or dragged on in the slightest. And then we have This Life, which is the ultimate guilty pleasure on this album for me because it does sound like Vampire Weekend, but it also sounds like Vampire Weekend mashed up with some 90s radio rock. The part where he sings, "I've been cheating through this life," is like, the first time I heard it, I'm like, is this horrible? But no, it's not horrible. It's a lot of fun, and it sounds like it would have absolutely dominated the radio in '96. The lyrics on this song also seem to deal with infidelity and, I don't know, self-doubt. But like I said, I'm not really paying attention to the lyrics at this point, so unless a song's lyrics actually stand out to me, I'm probably not going to mention it from this point on. Anyway, this song is great. The vocals are great. Ezra's vocals throughout this album are pretty good, so that's another thing that I feel like I really shouldn't have to mention, but I probably will because there are some weaker vocal melodies and vocal performances on this album. But Ezra's great. The instrumental is a lot of fun. The vocal melody is pretty awesome, and honestly, this is tied with Harmony Hall for probably my favorite cut on the record. And finally, to end off the pretty great opening stretch of this record, we have Big Blue. Now, I have no clue what Big Blue's about. Maybe it's a tribute to the Super Smash Bros. Melee stage. I don't know. The effects-laden slide guitar on this song reminds me of Cloud's Taste Metallic era Flaming Lips. The vocal melody is great, and the way that Ezra sings it is so intimate and sounds so personal, and even though I have no clue what he's singing about, I feel completely drawn into it anyway. Once again, there's choral effects on this song, like on Hold You Now, where the chorus comes in, and I don't really know how to feel about it, but it does not stay long enough to really make a really big impression on me, so I can't really say that I mind it. After Big Blue, though, my enjoyment of the record does kind of taper off, but that's not to say that it becomes bad or anything. In fact, I don't think that there's really a weak track on this album until we get a little deeper into the second half. You have How Long, which comes after Big Blue, and I do like that track. I think it's got an infectious vocal melody, an infectious vocal performance, but unlike the last few songs, I think the instrumentation and the way that it was produced kind of leaves me in the dark a little bit and doesn't really offer much for me in the way of a lot of absorption or immersion. There's a joke about the band to be made in the song title of Unbearably White, but this is one of the only tracks on the album in which I actually get a little bit out of the lyrics. I enjoy the wordplay of unbearably blank as it creates a sense of tension in the verse where you're wondering what adjective is unbearable this time. And while I'm not, once again, completely sold on the instrumental of this one, I do think that it's overall a pretty decent track, even if it does overstay its welcome by about a minute. Rich Man feels like a indie folk song recorded 20 years ago was chopped and screwed by Ezra, and then a vocal melody was added over it. And while it is interesting and overall a pretty okay song, I think that it has a very abrupt ending and doesn't feel like a finished song, unlike some of the other short tracks on here. The second Daniel Haim collaboration follows Rich Man, and that is Married in a Gold Rush. I do like the lyrics better on this one than usual on the record because I'm really able to make something out of what's happening, and I like the metaphor for a gold rush, meaning like rushing a relationship too quickly. But while I do think that Daniel Haim and Ezra have better vocal chemistry on this than Hold You Now, I think the song behind this one is weaker than Hold You Now's, making it an inferior track. It is an interesting mix of alt country, indie-tronica, and indie pop, but I certainly wouldn't consider it a highlight. Does it feel like I've been talking about this album for a while because Married in a Gold Rush is the 9th song on the album, which means that it's only halfway through. yes, we are only halfway through the album talking about it at this point. And from this point on, I'm obviously not going to reference the rest of the tracks because I don't really just want to give you a track by track. But I do think that that really highlights a major problem with this record. By the time Married in a Gold Rush rolls around, I'm starting to get a little bit sick of the album. We still have half the record to go, and out of the rest of the tracks on this record, the only real highlight that compares to anything in those first 5 tracks is the first Steve Lacy collaboration on the album, Sunflower. It sounds a bit like Vampire Weekend enlisting Yes to create a funk track, and as bad as that sounds, it's not. It's actually really cool, and I think that it doesn't overstay its welcome at all at being just under 2.5 minutes. I think that it completes the song, and that vocal melody and that strange little almost Yes Zappa-esque is really, really fun and catchy. And yes, while Sunflower is a highlight and it is the 12th song on the record, it also has the distinction of being the last truly good song on the record, meaning that tracks 13 through 18, the last 6 tracks, are probably the worst tracks on the album. They aren't bad, but they do create a lull in this record that makes me really not want to listen to it after Sunflower. You have the second Steve Lacy collaboration, Flower Moon, which doesn't even compare to Sunflower in my opinion, due to its strange auto-tuned vocals, and yes, while it does have a very fun feel to it, it just doesn't grab me in at all like Sunflower does. You have 2021, which is just way too short to even make an impression. I can't even tell you what it sounds like despite listening to it probably 4 or 5 plus times. And While We Belong Together does see Daniel Haim and Ezra linking together for their final collaboration on the album, this is the weakest out of the 3, and yes, their chemistry is just as good as it was on Married in a Gold Rush, but the song, once again, is even weaker than the other 2 collaborations. And the last 3 songs, don't get me wrong, they're not bad or anything like that, like I said, but they are the weakest songs on the record in my opinion, and they really slow the flow of this album down to a grinding halt because everything that I've wanted to hear from the record, all the highlights, they've already passed. Sure, Stranger has a fun chorus, but the rest of the song around it, as well as the instrumentation, is just not great. At this point, it just seems like the album has overstayed its welcome, and even outside of the context of the record, these songs aren't going to be the ones that I'm going to go to because the first 5 songs, Sunflower and some of the other stuff from the first half, are just much better cuts that really are just better versions of stuff that are going to show up on the second half. Also, the closer, Jerusalem, New York, Berlin, approaches almost millennial pop levels with its synth and vocal melodies, and I'm not really here for that. It's one of the better examples of pseudo-millennial pop, sure, but I really don't have a desire to listen to it ever. Overall, though, I think that Father of the Bride, if taken as a whole, is a relatively enjoyable album, and that kind of surprises me. Now, I'm not going to go around telling people that I'm a Vampire Weekend fan now or anything like that, but I really do like that first 5-track stretch quite a bit, and out of the 18 songs on here, I like 12 of them a lot. That does leave 6 tracks of filler, all of them being at the end of the record, and that does make it a little bit of a difficult listen, but I do think that overall, this is a good album. Despite being a bit of a mess, Father of the Bride is a fun and eclectic mix of indie pop, indie folk, chamber pop, and sunshine pop that, while it is a bit of a mixed bag, has many more high points than low ones. And that's why I'm going to be giving this album a low to mid 7 out of 10. And that is going to complete my review of Vampire Weekend's Father of the Bride. So make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and do all those other things that one does on YouTube. Leave in the comments what album you want me to review next. And I will see all of you on the next album review. Thank you.